It's curious how a country that preaches freedom to the entire world constantly lives on the brink of war, isn't it? The United States, once again, finds itself facing a choice that goes far beyond the borders of Venezuela. Its power trying to overcome its own conscience. While President Donald Trump speaks of protecting America, the Senate must decide whether to protect the world from a possible mistake. And amidst this tension, the U.S. Constitution, that old book forgotten in many drawers of power, is once again demanding its word. Some say this is just another political dispute. But what if it's more than that? What if we're witnessing the beginning of a war fought not with bombs, but with votes and speeches? A conflict between what is legal and what is moral, between duty and desire. After all, when a president believes he can act without limits, the danger lies not only in the enemy outside, it's within the government itself. So stick with me until the end of this video, because what's happening in Washington could change how the world views power, and how power views the world. And if this kind of reflection resonates with you, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because here we don't just talk about politics, we talk about awareness, history, and the lessons that power insists on teaching us. The weight of the decision. There are times when a nation needs to look in the mirror and decide who truly rules, power or conscience. In the United States, this reflection took shape when the Senate faced a resolution capable of limiting the president himself. The U.S. Constitution, written over 2 centuries ago, echoes as a reminder that not even the most powerful man in the world can act without accountability. The decision to attack another country, such as Venezuela, is not merely military. It is moral, political, and historical. It is the kind of choice that defines the course of an entire generation. In the heart of the American Congress, the air seems heavier than the silence. Senators walk the corridors of the White House knowing that each vote can change the fate of thousands of lives. The proposed war resolution is not just a legal document. It is a line drawn between prudence and recklessness, between diplomacy and chaos. Some argue that Trump is fulfilling campaign promises. Others see a risk of authoritarianism disguised as bravery. And in this power game, American democracy is being tested, as it hasn't been in a long time. An old senator once said that haste in attacking has always been the shortcut to ruin. He recalled that empires fall not because of the enemy's strength, but because of the arrogance of believing they need no limits. The current resolution is more than a political gesture. It is a reminder that true power lies in knowing how far one can go. And, while the Senate debates the future of Venezuela, the world watches in silence, wondering what will happen when duty and desire collide. History repeats itself. Those who observe American politics from afar might think the current impasse is something new. But the truth is that the United States has a long tradition of presidents attempting to circumvent Congress in the name of national emergency. From Vietnam to Iraq, history shows that every time presidential power oversteps the limits of the U.S. Constitution, the price is high, paid with lives, reputations, and belated regrets. It's curious how, in the name of security, many forget that haste has destroyed more nations than war itself. Lyndon Johnson used an ambiguous resolution to justify years of bloodshed in Vietnam. George W. Bush, decades later, relied on vague authorization to invade Iraq under pretexts that proved false. Today, Trump finds himself facing the same mirror, with Venezuela reflecting the same dilemma. To what extent does national interest justify violating the very rules that underpin a democracy? The American Congress seems, finally, willing not to repeat the mistakes of the past, even though the temptation of power is always seductive. It's like a cycle that refuses to end. The empire born under the promise of freedom continues to fight against its own shadow. Each generation of politicians seems to need to prove again that a nation's strength lies not in the missiles it possesses, but in its ability to say no when ego wants to say now. And perhaps that is the true test for the Senate today, to show that wisdom, not fury, should guide the destiny of nations. Because if history teaches anything, it is that those who do not learn from it are condemned to relive it. Between the law and the ego, there is a very fine line between leadership and vanity. And, in American politics, that line is often painted with the ink of power. Donald Trump, with his unpredictable style and populist charisma, represents the archetype of the leader who believes he is his own destiny. He defies norms, disregards conventions, and thrives on conflict. But the U.S. Constitution was written precisely to curb such impulses, not to stifle leadership, but to remind us that even the most absolute power needs checks and balances. And, in Trump's case, the boundary between law and ego seems increasingly blurred. Many presidents have faced the same dilemma. How far can a man go when he believes he is saving his country? Richard Nixon said that when the president does something, it isn't illegal. This phrase, which resonates even today, summarizes the danger of a limitless mentality. Trump, in considering military action in Venezuela without congressional approval, seems to be revisiting the same abyss, that of blind conviction. It is the kind of conviction that transforms leaders into tyrants and decisions into tragedies. And yet the paradox is irresistible. The more power one has, the harder it is to listen to those who warn of its risks. In every fiery speech, in every promise to make America strong again, there is a whisper of temptation, the same one that led ancient empires to ruin. The true leader, however, is the one who knows that strength lies not in acting first, but in reflecting before acting. Perhaps Congress, by blocking Trump, is trying to remind him and the world that even giants need limits. The invisible border of war. Not every war begins with a gunshot. Sometimes it begins with silence, the kind of silence that hangs before the storm. In recent months, American military activity in the Caribbean has drawn an invisible border, a kind of veiled warning to Venezuela and the world. Warships, fighter jets, covert operations, and contradictory statements create a tense, almost cinematic atmosphere. It seems that the conflict doesn't need to be officially declared to already be underway. And that is precisely what worries the American Congress. The risk of a president opening fire without ever admitting that he started a war. The Senate watches cautiously as the White House insists on calling everything defensive maneuvers. It's the same script used in the past, when invasions were disguised as humanitarian missions and bombings were called stabilization operations. Today, Venezuela is becoming the stage for a much larger geopolitical dispute, where every military move is also a chess move between powers. And on the chessboard of American foreign policy, the pieces move too fast for those who still believe in diplomacy. International law experts warn that the line between preparation and provocation is thinner than one might imagine. And when military power begins to speak louder than common sense, the danger is not just a declared war, but a sequence of irreversible decisions. It's like lighting a match in a dry field and hoping the wind won't blow. While the Senate debates and the U.S. Constitution tries to remind the world who should really authorize a war, the gears of history keep turning, silently but relentlessly. The risk of contradiction. If there is anything more dangerous than war, it is the inconsistency of those who command an army. Donald Trump, amidst fiery speeches and sudden retreats, seems to live in a constant conflict between instinct and reason. One day he denies any intention of attacking Venezuela. The next, he authorizes military movements that say otherwise. This oscillation not only confuses allies and adversaries, but also undermines the credibility of the United States itself. And, in foreign policy, credibility is like glass. When it breaks, no one sees their reflection anymore. Within the American Congress, unease is growing. Legislators from both parties report not receiving clear information about costs, targets, or objectives. There is talk of protecting the continent, but what is seen is an increase in fighter jets and ships in the Caribbean. The U.S. Constitution demands transparency, but the government seems to act with the same secrecy it claims to combat. It's as if the country, which once symbolized democracy, is now experiencing the bitter taste of distrust. And this, historically, always precedes chaos. Perhaps the greatest risk is not an attack on Venezuela, but an attack on coherence. When a leader changes his mind with the wind, the nation loses its direction. Foreign policy becomes a chessboard without rules, and each contradictory statement becomes a spark in international powder kegs. The Senate tries to contain this instability, but the truth is that in times of contradiction, every truth becomes doubt, and every doubt a harbinger of crisis. The American dilemma. Ultimately, the greatest enemy of the United States may not be Venezuela, nor any other country, but the very dilemma of its political soul. The nation that built its identity on the banner of freedom is now at a crossroads. How far can one go to protect democracy without betraying it in the process? The U.S. Constitution has attempted to maintain this balance for centuries, reminding us that power is most dangerous when it is believed to be for the common good. It is a bitter irony, but a reality. Many wars began with speeches about peace. Between protecting national security and respecting international law, the American government finds itself facing a divided mirror. On one side, the temptation of unlimited power. On the other, the moral responsibility to be accountable. History has shown that when force replaces dialogue, the result is not victory. It is emptiness. It is the kind of emptiness that no arsenal can fill, because what is lost is invisible. Respect, trust, moral authority before the world. And perhaps that is precisely the test for this generation. If the Senate decides to block the attack, it will not only be preventing a war, but reaffirming the essence of what it means to be a democracy. If it yields, the country will remain strong in appearance, but weakened within. Because a nation's true victory is not in conquering territories, but in proving that it is still capable of conquering itself. And while the American Congress votes, the entire planet holds its breath, waiting to see what will be stronger, power or conscience. Ultimately, the question that echoes is simple, but frightening. Who watches over power when power decides to act alone? History shows that every time ambition triumphs over prudence, the price is paid by the innocent. The American Senate, in considering this resolution, is not only voting on Venezuela, it is voting on the limits of humanity itself. And if we look closely, perhaps this lesson is not only theirs. How many times in our own lives has the haste to do the right thing led us to cross limits we swore to respect? The politics of the powerful mirror, the internal battles of each of us. Between pride and reason, between impulse and wisdom, there is always a silent battlefield. Perhaps true power lies in stopping, thinking, and choosing consciously. Because, in the end, the difference between ruin and legacy lies in a single decision, acting out of vanity or out of truth. And that choice, my friend, doesn't belong only to Trump. It belongs to all of us. And if you believe that knowledge is the best weapon against manipulation, then leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell. That way, you can continue to follow in-depth analyses like this one, unfiltered, without superficiality, to understand what is really behind the headlines. Because the world changes, but consciousness that needs to remain awake.